let's see if we can go with Carly. Send to. Let's see if this works. Hi everybody, sorry, bear with us just a moment. We're trying to connect our interviewer here. Let's see. All right, looks like Carly's joined. We can go.
All the waves.
Hi everybody, thank you so much for joining us today. Sorry, we're just trying to get everything set up here. Let's see. So we're doing a joint live video. We're just waiting for the other person to join in. Whoop, looks like we might have her. Hi Carly.
Hi everyone.
All right, so I'll let Carly take it from here. I am Cody, excuse me, the president of MPS Army Foundation. Carly is our social media expert. So most of the time when you are on social media or you're talking to one of us, it's probably Carly. And then I will let her introduce this lovely lady next to me.
All right.
Hi, Carly.
Hi, how are you guys tonight?
Good.
Good.
Awesome. Right. So a little intro before we get started. Thank you so much for everyone joining. So far we have 5 viewers, but I know that a ton of you are going to join. So we're going to share more about what MPS is like to live with. Obviously, two ladies right here, Tam and Cody. We will be interviewing Tam, who is the mother of MPS Army President Cody. Tam had a daughter, Tiffany, who lived with MPS 3A. It's also known as Sanfilippo syndrome. I may have mispronounced that, so I apologize.
Close enough.
Sam will be sharing her story to better understand what it's like for animals with MPS and what goes on in caring for them. We would like to let everyone know that this video may be hard to watch. It will be unfiltered and honest. You will hear about happy moments with Tiffany, and you'll also hear about the hardest moments a mother would ever have to go through with their child. The purpose of this video is to educate and to really dive into a deeper understanding of the rare disorder called, ready, mucopolysaccharidosis, which is also MPS. And I may have mispronounced that too.
No, you did great.
Real quick, I'm going to jump in. Can everybody hear us all right? This is our first time doing a joint live video, so I want to make sure everyone can hear okay.
I can hear you.
Maybe they can't hear us at all.
We can hear you.
If you can hear us, can you just post in the comments?
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
perfect. Thank you, guys.
Awesome.
All right.
All right. So do you ladies want to get started?
We're ready.
All right. So kind of like an intro question. Can you tell us what MPS pup Tiffany is associated with?
I'm sorry, you broke up a little bit.
Oh,
One
sorry.
more time?
So can you tell us what MPS pup Tiffany is associated with?
What MPS pup?
Yes.
That would have been Vader.
And how surprised?
Vader was Cody's dog.
And how surprised were you to find out that Vader had MPS too?
Well, I don't know how it is in dogs, but in humans, only 1 in 100,000 people would carry the gene that would cause MPS. And so for me to find another 1 in 100,000, my husband, to produce it, then we have a 25% chance of having a kid with MPS. So to have a child who had a dog with MPS, I think that's unheard of.
Definitely. Quite the surprise, I'm sure.
Yes.
All right. So how is MPS 3, which is what Tiffany had, and it's common in cats, unlike MPS 6, which is common in dogs. So how is it different from MPS 6?
Well, MPS 3, there are several MPSs, and they're all known as a syndrome. And a syndrome just means they have a lot of things alike. So each of the different MPS syndromes have a different enzyme that's missing in the dog or person. in MPS 3A, which Tiffany had, and A was the most severe, there's A, B, and C, there was a lot of physical issues, which is also common with MPS 6 dogs, but it also affected them neurologically and mentally. So I think that might have been different. Whereas Vader didn't seem like he had any kind of neurological or mental problems going on. My daughter did.
Oh, okay. So can you describe the progression, how the disorder MPS affected Tiffany over the years?
Well, MPS kids and dogs start out looking very normal. And then as the disease progresses, they start losing abilities, and then you hit these little plateaus. So things will go down and then you'll normal out, and then things will go down and normal out again. So with Tiffany's disease, she was a little behind on things, but she had other things going on, like she had a hole in her heart and needed surgery for that. So we had a lot we were dealing with. By the time she was 3, she was diagnosed. By the time she was 6, she was so hyperactive that we couldn't control her at all. And she also had pica, so she would eat everything around. And then it would get, for like several years, it would get even worse. So by the time she was 8, we ended up needing extra help. She wasn't sleeping at all. So we had to have her, well, we'll probably get into that later, but we ended up having to have her placed in a facility for a while to help us out. And then with each progression of the syndrome, these drops, until it plateaus out, they're severe and they're really hard. So, you know, until she was 6, it was hard. And then until she was 8, it was hard. And then until she was 10, it was hard. You know, you had these severe drops.
So the hards more or less become your new normal.
Well, just about the time you have it figured out, something new happens and you drop again.
Oh, no.
So I don't know what normal is.
So obviously with those plateaus, you noticed how different she was compared to normal children. So what made you notice something that was actually different with Tiffany compared to other children? What was maybe the first sign?
She wasn't progressing as fast as I only had a son before her. So she wasn't walking or talking like she should have been, or like I thought she should have been. But the doctor said, well, that's because she had heart issues. So they just kept kind of, you know, blowing it off until finally I insisted that they do some extra testing. And they did lots of different kinds of testing. And it wasn't until they did a skin biopsy that they actually found it. And then they didn't know what it was. So we had to all get schooled.
Oh my gosh. And that definitely took quite a long time before you fully understood it, I'm sure.
Yeah, she was diagnosed at age 3.
That's insane. That's crazy. And like you mentioned before, you eventually had to place her. So how long was it until she lived at home where you thought, all right, she definitely needs to be placed in order to get the help she deserves?
Well, from the time she was 6 to age 8, by then I had Cody, my other daughter, who is the president of MPS Army, and Cody was a toddler. And we had lots of things that happened where Cody was in danger because Tiffany was hyper. And by hyper, what I mean is she would form a course throughout our house, and it was always a triangle. And she would run and like hit the wall, and then run and hit the front glass door, and then run and hit another wall. And if you put a chair in the way, she'd have to set up a new course. And so this running and hitting happened all day, every day. And she would only sleep about 2 hours at night. So we tried doing it for years, and then we just couldn't. So that's when she was placed.
So she was placed about 8 years old.
Mm-hmm. She was 8 when she went into facility.
Can you tell us a little bit about the home that she was placed in and that experience of having to place her?
Well, first she wasn't placed in a home. First she was placed in a state hospital, and that scared me to death. So for a mother to turn her child over to complete strangers and leave her there, I mean, it's just, I can't even tell you how horrible that feels. So we kept in close contact. And she had 3-on-1 care. and we got to know her doctor that was, dealing with her every day. So we started to feel really safe. And then the state of California decided that children couldn't be in state facilities anymore. Now, Tiffany was at Porterville State Hospital, and she was the only child there. So she had an entire wing dedicated just to Tiffany. So she had people dropping in when they wanted to play, and she was always friendly and always happy and always running, and they loved her. But then I had to look for a facility that was privately owned. Now, in a state facility, there's all kinds of checks and balances so that kids are kept safe. In a private facility, not so much. So then it got a lot scarier.
Oh, I'm sure. I'm sure. So as she got older, did Tiffany go to school?
She did. She went through all the grades just like normal kids, but she went to like special education. And we really fought hard. It was during that time when handicapped kids were kept separate from the general population. So we were some of the pioneers in getting them close to normal kids so that normal kids could see these kids and not be afraid of them. And so these kids could learn how to adapt to normal kids. So
I'm going to jump in real quick, Carly. Anybody in the chat, if you have any questions while we're going over any of this, please feel free to ask them, and we'll be sure to try and answer those for you as well.
Somebody else will have to read those.
I'll try and jump in.
Okay.
Sorry.
So yeah, she did, and she graduated like any other normal kid. Her dad took her to her prom. So
she got to experience everything, which is great.
She did. I don't know how much, she retained, but she loved school. So
time, that's all that matters.
Yeah.
Oh, somebody asked if you could explain what pica is.
Oh, okay. Pica is something, sometimes pregnant women get pica. And it's an unnatural craving for things that are dangerous for you. Like sometimes pregnant women crave things like Drano, stuff that's just dangerous.
What were some things that Tiffany craved?
Tiffany would eat anything. So one of the things that she liked to do was she would take a door handle and slam it into the wall so that it would break a hole, and then she'd eat the drywall. So we were in the hospital for all kinds of things she ingested, like glass and nails, and let's see, she ate an ornament off a Christmas tree, all kinds of plants, pretty much anything that she could get a hold of, she would eat. So we had to have special arm braces made for her so that it kept her arms straight and she couldn't reach her mouth, so then she could play.
Quite the adventure.
Yeah, it was crazy, but it was normal for us.
All right. So were there some unusual things that happened during hospital visits that wouldn't happen to most children for you guys?
Well, we had one hospital visit, and this kind of routinely happened a lot. She would do things that were so unusual, like we were having soup one night, and I set a big pot in the center of the table, far away from her, because we knew she liked to grab things. Well, she jumped up on her chair, grabbed the pot, and pulled it down, and it spilled all down her crotch. And so we went, quickly, we put her in the bathtub to cool her down, but then we took her to the hospital, and they see this scalding crotch in a young girl, and they're, of course, interrogating us for that. So pretty much any time we went in for emergencies, they would run through the whole spectrum of, well, where were you, and why didn't you catch it, and are you fit to be a parent? Eventually, they got to know us. So
she had tubes put in her ears for a situation, correct?
She had all kinds of, she couldn't hear when she was little, and they found out it was just because of fluids backing up. She had all kinds of respiratory problems, so the fluids would build up, and then she couldn't hear anybody, so we had to learn sign language. Oh, and then they put tubes in, and she could hear.
And then I know it's common with MPS dogs, a concern with sedation. Did you have that concern with Tiffany as well?
Anytime that she was sedated, there would be, her main issue through her entire life was respiratory. So if you sedate somebody, they're not moving stuff like they're supposed to. And when they start to come out, they tend to inhale, saliva or anything else that's there. That causes pneumonia, all kinds of respiratory issues. So it was always a life and death situation if she went under. And she had lots of surgeries for totally unrelated issues. Tonsillectomy, and she had a hernia that had to be repaired, and she had lots of different surgeries.
And someone asked, would you explain that Tiffany would eat a lot of different things like the glass? Did she have any permanent internal damage from any of that?
She did not, which I think is a complete act of God. My husband was a carpenter and a general contractor in California, and so she would constantly find his stuff and eat it. We sat in the hospital waiting for them to come see us when she ate the glass, and we said, she's got glass in her stomach. This can't be good for her. And they said, it's not going to cause any problem. It'll eventually come out. And I'm like, well, then we're going home. So most of the things you ingest aren't a problem. The biggest problem we had was with plants. We had to be careful to just keep her completely away from house plants and things like that. I know the dogs have this issue too. They get into things. So all of you with MPS dogs, make sure your house plants are safe.
Sorry, Carly, real quick. There was another question. Whole Puff Pie asked how old is Tiffany now? Because I'm an older woman who had 2 children, and from the looks of you, you don't look old enough to have anybody older than my kids. She mentioned today is her eldest son's birthday, who passed away many years ago. He would have been 35 years old.
Tiffany actually passed away 3 years ago, and she was 30 at the time.
Sorry, Carly.
Yeah.
And what is the common age for those with MPS and the type that she had? What is the common age they lived usually?
Well, when she was diagnosed, now this was a long time ago, and MPS has come a long way since then. But at the time they said, in fact, our doctor, he said, I want you to sit down, and after I tell you this, I want you to leave and pretend you never had a child. Just leave her here. That's how he informed us of what he was about to say. And then he said, your daughter has a rare syndrome, and she's going to die before she's 10. I mean, he just put all the ugly stuff out there. And being the mom that I am, and she was only 3 at the time when we got this information. I was like, there's no way in hell I'm going to leave my child here.
Oh my God.
We did find out that that particular doctor had a child himself who had to be placed, and he knew what we were about to run into. So in his awkward, unsociable way, he was trying to prevent us some heartache, but he just kind of threw it all in our face, and that's where we were.
Hard, definitely.
Yeah, so anything that I'm about to share that Carly asked me, please let it go. If it doesn't pertain to you, don't get mad. Your child is going to be different than my child. So.
Darla has been asking a few questions, which is great. Questions are completely welcome. That's how we all learn about MPS. But she wanted to offer her prayers and condolences.
Oh, thank you so much.
And then she said she's still, let's see, because I'm a fight, my mom to those are fighting words. So she just says she's a fighter like you are.
Yeah. And that's another point I'll just touch on real quick. In school, because I'm a fighter by nature, I had to grow up a lot through this process, but in school, I was always fighting. I was fighting the doctors, fighting the teachers, fighting everything, because I was really, truly fighting the disease. So I learned as I went that these people, the teachers, the doctors, the social workers, all these people they're there to help me. And when I could learn to honor them, then they started working better with me, and we got a lot further. So I had to learn that my nature, even though it was to fight, I had to do it with honor, and I had to be gentle, and I had to get somewhere.
Definitely hard, though.
Yeah. So make friends with your vets.
And so as you explained like the feelings that you felt and how you had to learn how to tame yourself, I'm sure you also dealt with guilt during the process. Did it ever come from any unexpected areas?
Every mother deals with guilt no matter what's going on with her kids. I mean, you could have the most perfect kids and you're still going to deal with guilt. The thing that surprised me most was my closest, not like my best friends, but I hate to even say it, but it was a lot of Christian people because that's who I hung around. They were the hardest on me. You know, they were the ones that figured I had done something wrong, or we had home births, so they blamed it on that, and it has nothing to do with that, it's genetic. They didn't understand, so they were trying to give me a reason for what was happening, and that's not very helpful. So you just have to realize that people love you, and they're just trying to help. They just don't know how. But yeah, I wasn't prepared for that to come from people that I knew.
No.
Because Tiffany's treatment was so extreme, what are some of the ways that you dealt with that? I know you mentioned you hung around with a lot of Christian friends. I know that was a big part of your life. Did that help?
It did. Later on in life, we ended up, my husband and I went to school and became pastors, and Tiffany went with us. I mean, we just adapted. So Tiffany's life, we had to get to a point where we didn't let it stop us. That for her to have a quality of life and for us to have a quality of life, we had to work together. So kind of a spoiler alert, she did end up coming home at age 18 and stayed with us until she was 30. So.
And so actually, when she regressed to complete dependency, what did that look like? Were there hip sores, nausea, overheating?
Yeah, all of that was part of it. When she was young, it was a series of, she had the arm braces, so you had to be careful that they didn't rub, and she was always incontinent, so you had diapers to deal with. Later, when she couldn't walk, then you started dealing with bed sores. Christopher Reeves had died during that time, so bed sores became a really big deal. That's what I think finally did him in. They get infected, they're painful, you have to keep moving them. So she would get it from sitting in her chair, she'd get it from laying in her bed, you had to get special beds. There was a lot to deal with. Overheating was huge. She was always hot.
How old was she when she became completely dependent?
Well, she went to her prom when she was 18, and that was the first time that she had to actually have a wheelchair assist. She was in the chair most of the time. From the time she was born till she was 17, she was pretty mobile. But right about age 18, then she started losing her mobility. We didn't discover hip dysplasia, where their hips come out of their sockets. We didn't discover that until years after that.
And that was actually something Vader dealt with as well. He had the same condition.
Mm-hmm. And sitting doesn't help, so moving around seems to help with hip dysplasia.
Because at that time, Tiffany couldn't walk and she couldn't talk. What are some ways that you knew what she needed, and what are some things as far as like knowing if she was dehydrated or if she had an upset tummy? What are some ways of knowing those?
Well, you all know your dogs, and you know when they're sick. You know when they're not right. It's the same with kids. Tiffany she could talk when she was little bitty, but she talked very little. And when she got older, she could talk with her expressions. So you always knew what was going on. She would grimace when something hurt. She would disconnect if she didn't want to look at you or deal with, like people would get in her face and want to introduce themselves, but they would sort of be talking over her head. She would just look away, and ignore them. So you get to learn gestures, really, is what happens. And you have to check. You have to check parts of them. So, with your little animals, you want to be checking to see if their hips hurt, to see if they're walking different, to see if they're swallowing, all the things that we did with kids.
And as you mentioned, like that children didn't have, is there anything that she dealt with that most children didn't have to deal with? Like oxygen, did she ever have to have like an oxygen tank?
She did. By the time she was in her later years, she ended up having, she had a feeding tube because she couldn't swallow anymore. She had oxygen that we traveled with. She had a percussor, which was something that pounded on her chest to keep everything loose and moving. She had all kinds of gadgets in her chair to keep her comfortable. We had an incline chair, so it tilted, so she could be in different positions and not always just sitting straight on her rear end. It also opened flat, so I could like take her to the theater and change her right in her chair because it would open flat.
She had like a suction tube when she would get really gurgly, which is something common with the MPS dogs as well, is they have a hard time getting all that gunk loosened up.
And just let me tell you, don't be afraid to suction. We had all my girlfriends, all my best friends knew how to suction Tiffany, and all the babysitters
Wait,
knew.
you explain, for a lot of us, we don't know what a suction machine looks like. So
a suction is, it's like, if you can imagine a vacuum, and it has a long straw, and you stick the straw either in their nose or their mouth. You know, you're trying to get all that mucus that gets clogged up there. Sometimes you have to go really deep to get them to cough and to get it to come out. We got to where we could do it while we were driving. You know, you could just wrap it around your fingers and you knew how it felt, so you could just reach in the back and suction her while you were driving. And I had a friend who did it, and I wouldn't recommend this. She ended up falling over the back seat into the back with Tiffany and was still suctioning. So I would recommend you pull over and do it. But
do you have any funny stories of like having to change her in a public location or anything that most adults would not have to do with their child?
Tiffany was famous for when we had an hour-long drive to the church we were going to, and she was famous for pooping on the way. So you always knew you had to deal with that once you got there, and you had to smell it the whole way there. But one time we went to Children's Hospital, and I pulled over into a section because I knew I had to change her, and it was really messy, and it's hard to change a 30-year-old child in a car, you know, and when it's really messy, you know, it's hard enough doing it at home. But anyway, we pulled over, and I got into a really quiet area and got the door open, and it was Fresno, so it was blazing hot, and got some air circulating, and went to change her, and this young man pulled up in a huge 4x truck, parked right next to me, and decided to eat his lunch. And I thought, well, you're going to be in for a big surprise. Enjoy this.
Trident is one of our MPS kitties, totally adorable with beautiful blue eyes. And Trident asked, did Tiffany have any problems with digestion or constipation? It seems to be something that Trident has issues with.
Yeah. Digestion and constipation, they go together. Constipation was the worst, and you know, because they're not going. So you just adjust. You find what works for them. For Tiffany, prune juice would work. A lot of times I would grind up things that I knew worked for me, and I would send it through her feeding tube, so she would get it just in a liquid form. All those things worked. We tried to stay away from medication. She didn't need a whole lot of medication, so we stayed away from it as much as possible.
You found a lot of medication actually made things more complicated and made her more sick, correct?
Yeah, a lot of the medications that they gave her because they didn't think she would live long, and they would cause problems like liver issues and stuff, which it did, or would cause ulcers, which it did. So, you know, you want to be really careful with that. Anything natural is better.
And someone asked in the chat if we had a picture of Tiffany. On MPS Army's Instagram, there's actually 4 pictures of her throughout different stages of her life, if you'd like to check that out.
And under Tiffany Sanders on Facebook, she has a whole page with all kinds of pictures.
All right. And as you before, like everyone had to learn how to suction Tiffany, and you mentioned babysitters. So did she actively have a babysitter? Would you rather rely on that? Or?
You kind of broke up, but the gist of it is, did she have babysitters? She did. And babysitters would be afraid because there was a lot to deal with. You know, it was scary for us in the beginning too. But we always told our babysitters, you know, the thing I want most is I want to be there when she passes away. And if she passes away on your watch, then I'm jealous. I'm jealous that you got to spend that precious time with her. So it's an honor and a privilege. You know, it's not something you have to be afraid of. It's going to happen one day. So consider it an honor.
Who were some people that frequently babysat Tiffany, and what kind of training did they need?
Well, Cody was our biggest babysitter. And she just learned by watching. Grandparents, they all learned. They came and they went through all the training just like we did. When we came home, Tiffany came home at age 18. She had gone into the hospital and she had pneumonia, and it was really bad. And they said, she's not going to make it through the night. And they said, do you want to take her home to die, or do you want her to die here? And I said, well, we'll take her home. We lived an hour away from the hospital up in the mountains. So they got an ambulance. My son was the only one with me, so he had to ride with her in the ambulance. He was a little worried, you know, that something might happen on the way home. I had to take the car and follow. And I forgot where I was going with this.
Training, people babysitting.
So when we left, they said, okay, you're taking her home. They didn't think she would make it through the night, so they said, here's all this equipment, take it with you. And they gave us like a 5-minute lesson on how to use all of it. So we learned by doing. And we taught the grandparents, we taught babysitters that came in, we taught all my best friends, you know, anybody that wanted to. We didn't push it on anybody, but if they wanted to help, we said, great, come over, we'll teach you how to watch her.
Some things that were really helpful when I had to babysit Tiffany, sorry, I'm over on the side, is for like her medicine, we'd put them in individual baggies and we'd label the time that they had to be given, and, you know, we'd leave notes on the fridge of different things that, you know, if this happens, this is what you can do to fix it, etc. So there was a lot of tools throughout the house, yeah, in case something happened. Somebody did ask, is MPS a lot like the ALS disorder?
I don't know much about ALS, so I can't answer that.
And then, were you able to be with her when she passed? Actually, we will be getting into that question a little bit further down. It's a little more detailed, so hang with us. We will answer that one.
Sorry, I'm dealing with allergies, so I'm trying to stay hydrated.
We're good at dealing with sickness around here.
So to ease that topic, actually, just a little bit, during her life, did you think that at any more point in time, this was Tiffany's final moment?
We thought that a lot during her life. Every time she went in for surgery, every time she was dealing with respiratory things, our doctor, and I would recommend all of you with dogs that you find a vet that is willing to work with you, because our doctor completely set us up at home so that we had a hospital at home. And she supported us, so if anything happened, we would have everything we needed right there. She wrote us a note so that coroners, you know, when they come out, the medical examiner, they would have a letter from the doctor that explained what was going on. So yeah, that was all things you need to be prepared for.
There was, when she was 3 and she had the heart incident, I remember you telling me that that was a pretty big moment for you. That was the first big impact where you thought this was it.
Yeah, when she was 3, it was a rainy day in Ventura, California. We were going to my dad's birthday, and she was congested. She was always congested. And we decided we would take her into an urgent care center real quick before going to the party. So we took her in. She wasn't doing well. They sent us over to the hospital, and this was our first time dealing with an actual hospital. So immediately I got afraid. So we went in there, and they took her in, and as soon as they got her settled, she had a full-blown cardiac arrest. And we're standing right there, you know, and they didn't have us move or anything. And to watch your child arrest right in front of you is so scary. Once they got her back, they said they needed to take her down to UCLA. So they were going to take her on the ride down to Los Angeles. It was about 60 miles away. They were going to helicopter her out, but it was the biggest storm Ventura had had in a while, and they couldn't get a chopper out. So they brought in an ambulance, and they said, come and kiss her goodbye, because you may never see her again. So we did. And we were going to follow her down, but we'd been praying, and we had this really incredible like peace. And so we decided we'd go home and sleep and then get up the next morning and go down so that we were prepared to deal with whatever was happening. So we did, and we drove down, and when we got there, they said they had over-sedated her because she was so agitated. They thought they had done it to the extreme to where they couldn't get her out. So here's like 3 times now that we dealt with, you know, first the arrest, then she may not make it through the storm, and then they over-sedated her. So every time we were in a hospital situation, it was like that. You were dealing with, you know, touch and go.
Definitely a surprise each time.
Yeah.
And so, like, obviously you're very open, very easygoing. So are you comfortable sharing with us the day that Tiffany died?
Yeah. Like I said, for me, it was an honor. That day was an honor. One of the hardest days I had was the day I had to place her at Porterville State Hospital. And this was probably, I don't know if I could say one was harder than the other because both felt like I was losing my child. So on the day that she passed away, it was during the Thanksgiving holiday. My husband and I decided to stay home for Thanksgiving, and she was with us, of course, but she wasn't doing really well.
That was typical for that time of year, that she would have a lot of struggles.
Yeah, during the holidays, it was always harder because the weather changed, and we lived in the mountains, so it was cold. And so anyway, and our doctor was going out of town, so she had given us a letter, just in case. So anyway, Tiffany made it through Thanksgiving, and then you know, as was typical with her, she would do poorly for quite a while, and then she'd start doing better. So we figured this is just that. So my husband was debating whether or not he should go to work the next day, and I said, you might as well. You know, I mean, we've been through this 100 times. So he did, and I went in, and Tiffany was real lethargic, but she was always like that when she was sick. And I said, well, if we're going to do this, let's do this. So I got her changed and sat her up and started the whole procedure of, you know, loosening up everything in her chest and getting her ready, and got her dressed, put her in her chair, brought her out. And she usually watched cartoons while, you know, she had her breakfast, and she was doing that. And I always get chores done while she's eating. So I had gone into the office to do something on the computer, and all of a sudden I heard a sound that didn't sound normal. And she was always raspy and very congested, so I thought, but this one alerted me. It sounded just different. So I came in, and she was struggling, so I had to stop all the machines, you know, stop the feeding, undo the tube, and take it off. And I picked her up and put her in my lap, and I was getting ready to suction her, and I tried getting the tube down, and it wouldn't go anywhere. It was like blocked. Completely blocked. And I was fighting and fighting and fighting, and she was struggling and struggling and struggling. And I realized this is different. This is it. I just knew at that moment this was it. So I set the suction down, and I picked her up, and we had bought a rocking chair that was big enough, big enough for me to hold her and rock her. So I brought her over to that. She still had her oxygen on, and I just held her while she struggled. And it felt like it went on forever, but I'm sure it was not very long. And she would gasp and gurgle and then stop breathing, and I would just cry. And then she would start breathing again. And I thought, oh my gosh, this is terrible. And I remember my husband said, when her time comes, I really would like it if we could just hand her over to Jesus. And so I took her hand and I just lifted it up and I just said, Jesus, will you just come take her hand? She can't do this anymore. And it was just a few more times of struggling, and then she finally stopped. And she just laid there. And I think I held my breath during all that because I wasn't sure if she would breathe again. And then finally I took a breath, and that was the end. And then I completely forgot everything that the doctor told me I was supposed to do at that point. So I had to call the doctor and ask her, I don't know what I'm supposed to do. She just passed away, and she's here in my arms, and I'd taken the oxygen off, and so she walked me through it.
I'm so sorry.
Thank you. Poor Cody's having a hard time too. But I did, it was just what I had always wanted to do. I felt like I had worked so hard for her life that I wanted to be the one with her when she passed away, and I was the only one with her when she did, and that just felt so good.
Ironically, that was the basically same exact experience that I had with Vader when he passed. Jimmy had just left the house to go get him something from the store to help with his congestion. And he jumped in my lap, and I talked him through it until he passed away. And he passed away in my arms, just like Tiffany did.
Yeah, it was almost identical.
So
It's crazy.
it's a little unusual.
If it's too personal, we could stop with the way that she away and like anything. Would you rather move on to something a little more happier?
Well, this is the nature of the beast. You know, this is what you have to prepare for. It will come, and you just have to deal with it. So then life goes on. Don't get stuck there. So yeah, let's keep going.
Well, thank you so much for really getting into the nitty gritty. A lot of the times, what we post is just happy videos, happy pictures. But you're right, this does happen, and a lot of people learn how to deal with it.
Yeah.
And the important thing to know is you don't have to deal with it alone. I mean, the second Vader passed away and I couldn't get a hold of Jimmy, I called my mom because she had been through it. There is somebody else that has been through this. MPS Army is full of family members who have been through this, and we are here for anybody, whether it's an MPS animal or just, any animal or child. Feel free to contact us during those times. If you just need somebody to sit on the phone with while you cry, I mean,
Yeah.
It helps.
Definitely helps. We're a whole community. That's what we're here for.
Yeah,
Exactly.
That's important.
So to continue on with Tiffany, would you mind sharing what is written on her death certificate?
Well, that's also part of the process. I would just recommend everybody get as much done before you get to the place where your dog or child is deathly ill. Try and get everything in place. So one of the things we had to do was go down to get a death certificate because she had died at home. And they said, so, they're pretty black and white. Okay, what's her name? What's her address? What's her occupation? And I said, gosh, she was a minister of the gospel. She showed Jesus everywhere she went without saying anything. She just, that's who she was. Well, anyway, they printed it, minister of the gospel, as her occupation. So I thought it was pretty precious that it's on her death certificate.
An example of that I always thought was very unique with Tiffany, and same thing with, Vader. Neither one could talk, but we'd be in a grocery store and somebody would just walk up to us crying and tell us their whole life story just because they saw Tiffany, in a wheelchair in the middle of the grocery store. So, I mean, there were so many different times that Tiffany and Vader affected people in ways that we will just never understand, and just completely changed and improved lives. There was somebody who was struggling being able to walk and saw Vader, and it encouraged them, and they were walking within, you know, months of that experience. So it's just amazing the way that they can affect the world around them.
On the bulletin at her memorial, it said, "Minister everywhere you can, and if necessary, use words." And that's what she was. That's what she did.
That's amazing. It is. And as you mentioned before, she was 30 when she passed away. So why do you think that this age is so significant for MPS? Was it common for them to even get this far? Was she just a very rare form?
Well, like I said, at the time, they didn't give her, you know, they said she would pass away before age 10. But then we started, as she started getting older, we started checking in to seeing how old people were. And as it progressed, we always found like 2 people who were older than her. One person, I remember, he was 21 and Tiffany was, you know, still a teenager. And I thought, oh my gosh, will she live to be 21? And at the time we were dealing with so many things. I was like, oh my gosh, is it going to be till 21, you know? But then we heard somebody made it to 30, and I was like, oh my gosh, how am I going to make it to that? So try not to look too far into the future. Try and just enjoy every moment as you can. And when I look back now, I think, gosh, it flew by. But when I was in the middle of it, it seemed like it was never ending.
Oh, I'm sure.
What are some things that you would say got Tiffany to that age? What are, you know, for us with MPS dogs, we find that honestly love is what encourages them to fight and to live longer than their expectancy. Would you say the same was for Tiffany?
Well, our doctor attributed it to that. She said the reason she's doing well is because she's at home with you and she's being loved. I also think that there was a lot I still needed to learn, and there was a lot I think she still needed to do. So I just knew when it was her time, it would be time. So I think it had to do with a lot of different factors. But yeah, taking care of them. And this is where I would say is if you feel like you can't, then get help or let somebody who can. There's no guilt or shame in that. You know, some people, I certainly wasn't designed to do this, but I learned how to do this. And
well,
I think kind of mastered it as I went.
Even you yourself for a period had to get help until you were in a better position to retake on the responsibility. And there's no shame or anything in that. Yeah. Help is your biggest ally in all of this.
You live your life with your child or dog the way you see fit. Don't live it the way other people think you should. Sermon in a minute.
Carly, I don't know if we have audio for you. Yeah, we can't hear you all of a sudden.
We lost audio.
Technical difficulties, everyone. I'm sorry.
Can you hear us? Is that a yes or no?
I'm not sure.
She can hear us.
Oh, hold on. We had a little audio.
Oh, there you are.
You back?
I can hear. Oh, let's.
Yeah. Carly, the audio seems to be kind of cutting in and out.
Oh, somebody else is having problems.
So let's try this again.
Sorry, we have a little delay going on, everyone. The internet. Talk again?
Any better?
No.
Or no?
A little bit.
Sometimes.
It's in and out.
We hear like every 10th word.
Gotta love technology.
Is it working now?
I do. Go ahead.
Working now?
I think it'll be good enough.
Okay.
Yeah. Okay,
right.
I think where were we? We just talked about Tiffany's age.
Yeah. And so my next question actually was that a lot of things come and go with families and with those from MPS as well. But a lot of common things are triggers. So were there any triggers for you or for Tiffany that happened commonly or once in a blue moon?
You might also want to explain what triggers are.
Yeah. Triggers are things that, okay, remember when you were dating and you just broke up with a boy and all of a sudden that song would come on and your mind went right back to that boy. That's a trigger. So
something that reminds you of the person.
Right. So yes, there were a lot of triggers with Tiffany. Still are. You never know when they're coming or when something's going to remind you of their life or their death. I'm not sure if we're still streaming. We keep getting...
We might have lost Carly, but I do have the questions here, so we can continue if we accidentally lose her, but I think she's back.
One thing that is a trigger for me are ladybugs, because that's what we called my daughter. We called her Ladybug. I have a little, I don't know if you can see it, a little ladybug hero tattooed on my arm. So whenever I see them, I think of her. I don't think she's here in the form of a ladybug. I just think of her. We did have kind of an unusual thing that happened with ladybugs. We moved into a new house, and one of our was on the inside. So we thought that was kind of strange, but it sure made me think of Tiffany. Let's see.
Sorry, guys. I'm going to try and get Carly back. I apologize for all of the disconnect going on here. I think she went offline. Okay, I will try and get her back on in just a moment, but we'll finish out this question. So, you mentioned the ladybugs being in the house. Were there any other triggers that? I know when you moved away from California, there was a couple triggers with people asking you about that.
About her dying?
About why you left.
Yeah, when people would ask why we moved to Florida, which is where we are now, it started with Tiffany passing away, and we decided it was time to reinvent our life. So that started our journey here. So that's a trigger. I don't know, it could be anything. It could be a moment or a person that you knew when she was alive that would come into your life, or across Facebook. Or Facebook is famous for triggers. They throw pictures up in the middle of whatever you're doing, a memory, and sometimes it's a memory of Tiffany. So the best thing to do is just to remember it as a happy moment and keep going. You're going to have that with your dogs too. Don't let those things throw you into depression or a dark place. Just keep going.
So we will continue on. Unfortunately, we did lose Carly during this.
Gosh, and she was so good.
I know. Maybe we'll get her back, but we'll go ahead and continue. When you remember Tiffany, what are the good things that you remember about her? Excuse me.
Tiffany loved to dance. She has a website. Do you remember what it's called offhand?
Ladybugtiff.com.
Ladybugtiff.com. And I believe there's a video of her dancing there. She was funny. She loved to connect with people. She didn't talk, so what she would do is she'd put her hands on your knees, and she'd get really close to you, and she'd just look right into your eyes. And you felt like she was reading everything that was inside. She had a great laugh. When we brought her home from the hospital and she was so sick, one day she just started to laugh. And she couldn't breathe, so it was a little scary, but it was also really funny. She just laughed hysterically, and she'd get wheezy, and it was great moments.
What are some funny quirks that Tiffany had? I know she had quite a few that I remember you telling me about. One of them happened in the middle of the night while you were sleeping.
Oh, that was well, no, that happened a few times. Tiffany didn't sleep very much. And before we were able to secure our home completely, she would get up and wander through the house. And so a lot of times I would wake up to a little person right in my face breathing while I was laying in bed. She would just be standing beside my bed, just staring at me and breathing right in my face. And it was always gave me a jolt.
Let's see here. I remember that when I was little, she used to always call me Amy, and that was because she loved babies. And what is the story behind the name Amy?
The first baby that Tiffany, it wasn't really the first one she met, but it was the first one she was aware of. That baby's name was Amy. And so we introduced the baby as, look, this is baby Amy. And so she thought all babies were called Amy. So when Cody was born, she called Cody Amy. And she loved Cody, although sometimes she would squish her. But she would sit in a chair and she'd pound on her chest, Amy. That meant she wanted to hold Amy. She wanted to hold her real close. So we'd let her hold Cody, and we'd hold our breath, and we'd stand right there. She loved her sister.
What are some of Tiffany's favorite things?
Yeah. Now you're reading off a paper, so
we have a cheat sheet.
So you have to give me a hint.
So things, and unfortunately, I don't remember too much from when Tiffany could talk. My experience of her was a lot more when she was older. But I remember the stories, and I know that Tiffany loved Mary Poppins, and she loved Donald's, which was McDonald's.
She also liked Donald Duck. She called him Donna Duck. McDonald's, we couldn't even drive by McDonald's without her coming unglued, so we'd have to distract her.
She also had a favorite, like, children's rhyme, right?
Oh, she loved the song 10 Little Monkeys Jumping on the Bed. And she would do all the motions, and she could say monkeys. That was one of the last words. Monkeys and mama were some of the last words she kept for a long time until she didn't talk anymore. But she'd get to the part and she'd say, bump there. And that was her favorite part. So we have lots of funny memories of her.
I know just a little while ago we were talking about triggers, and Mary Poppins being one of Tiffany's favorite movies. They are about to introduce Mary Poppins Returns, and for me that was one of the recent triggers that I experienced at the movie theater actually last night. So
Cody has triggers too.
Little things that you remember about people. What advice would you give to a parent who is caring for an MPS child or animal?
Well, when Tiffany was in a group home, they had behavioral specialists that came in and dealt with the children and all their issues, and I got to go to those meetings, and he would say, well, Johnny needs to do this, so let's try this program to make sure he does it, or this person needs to interact with other people, so let's make sure we get him around people. They would get to Tiff, and no matter what she was doing that seemed like a behavioral issue, they would say, let's just take her to Disneyland. Let's just let her go to the park. Let's just let her enjoy life. And so I would suggest that for everybody that's dealing with MPS is your life is unusual, and you just need to take advantage of everything you can. Do those unusual things and make good memories.
Were you able to take Tiffany on any vacations, and if so, where and why did you choose that location?
We took her to a lot of conferences that we went to as part of our school and training to be pastors. She wasn't crazy about those, but she went, and we would pack up all her gear. It was easiest going to Disneyland because they catered to special needs kids. So that was always my funnest vacation. Now I live right down the street from Disney World, so I feel like I'm kind of in heaven myself. But anyway, go where it's easy. So with your dog, go to dog parks that are easy. Take them everywhere you can. It's quality of life. So let them and you enjoy as much life as you can.
So if somebody wanted to contact you and talk to you more about MPS or what it's like having a child with MPS, and they would like